Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'll pick right up where Ms. Schakowsky left off, because I think this really is fundamentally a question that we're all facing right now. What we are seeing right now in the unemployment issue is both a policy question and a technology question. We have control of the policy choices. We, meaning Congress, we could make the decision before these unemployment benefits lapse, and I hope we do. But there's a lot of sort of hand wringing around the issue. Um, there's a lot of discussion about whether the $600 supplemental benefit was correct. It was done for its simplicity in part. That added with state benefits was intended to equate somewhat roughly to replacement rate wages for the broad spectrum of people who lost their jobs. But I would really be concerned, given the technological problems that we've seen just in implementing the $600 uniform benefit. I would really be concerned with challenging states to somehow implement a replacement wage system when we're talking about tens and tens of millions of people who are struggling with this problem. And I reject out of hand the idea that the $600 is what's keeping people from going back to work. What's, for the most part, keeping people from going back to work is either there's no work to go back to, or they're afraid, naturally, to go back into the workplace when they are at risk of contracting this really dangerous and deadly disease. So I guess I would be interested in what you all see, maybe starting with you, Ms. Dixon, because you did rightfully point out that in Michigan, while we've made improvements, we made improvements from a horrible system that at one point in time, under the previous administration, essentially charged 20,000 people with unemployment fraud because they had a lousy system. And we've had to make up for that. And the current governor has been attempting to do that. But can you talk about the challenges that the states would have to go through in order to calculate and come up with a replacement rate basis for this federal supplement, as opposed to using a more simple formula that we adopted in the CARES Act? I'm starting with Ms. Dixon, but then I'd open it up to others to comment.
Absolutely. So each state has its own specific UI program and its own specific UI formula for how they calculate benefits. And so that being the case, it's horribly complex for each state to then have to rework their benefit formula to reach that target replacement rate. So it's actually a lot of work to get that done. Particularly, I think in the case where the $600 is obviously bolstering the economy in a very tragic crisis situation.
Other members of the panel? Yes.
I think you should be very concerned. I think any changes now are going to cause some chaos. We, through the United States Digital Response, have had volunteer teams working with 6 states on their unemployment delivery, and the public servants that they're partnered with are not incompetent. They're very dedicated. They are working as hard as they can, given the constraints that they're under. But they really, the system itself is pushed to its limits, and I think you should take them at their word when they say that there will be a disruption. I think the one thing we've really learned in this technology transformation world over the past 10 years is that policy and technology have to go together. They do go together, and we need to make policy with the implementation in mind. Understanding how it will be implemented is the only way to get the results that your policy intends.
I think that's a really important point. In order to create public value, we have to have operational capacity. And I think sometimes we just assume, well, we just pass a law and, by magic, it all just sort of gets implemented. The case here is to get help to Americans. And I think finally, I'll say this. It is a technical question, but it's a technical question that we ought to consider when we adopt these policies. And if we don't believe that we've invested in the technology sufficient to allow a more detailed solution, then we ought to just keep it simple. And what I say is, before the end of this month, let's give states ample time to continue to administer this process, and then make sure that we're making the investments in far better technology and get ahead of this the way we want to plant a tree 20 years ago. We ought to get ahead of it. We ought not let the perfect be the enemy of the good. We ought to get it done before the end of this month. It stimulates the economy and it helps Americans survive this. I thank the panel and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this very important hearing.
Absolutely.